So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nevada County Suicide Prevention Town Hall. And first, credit where credit is due. Has been organized by Toby, who has pulled together all these fabulous panelists, and I'll be your moderator, but that's about all I'm going to do. Just as for a brief intro, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And we all know that taking care of ourselves and others is important, particularly now. And let's face it, we're all pretty stressed and anxious and all that stuff. So, but how do you help someone if you know they're struggling? Where do you go? What are the signs and what resources are available? And that is what these professionals are here to talk about and to answer your questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it to Phoebe, who can, and I'm going to ask all our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll take it from there. Phoebe, you're up.
Thanks, Pascal, and thanks everyone for being here today for such an important conversation. My name is Phoebe Bell. I'm the Behavioral Health Director for Nevada County, and maybe I'll throw it to Nevada County staff. Curtis, and there's my dogs.
Hello, I'm Curtis McMullen. I work as a clinical supervisor at Children's Behavioral Health, and I've worked in the remote crisis team for roughly 20 years, and I'm on the Nevada County Emergency Response Team for the last 7 years.
Hi, I'm Priya Cannell, and I am an analyst with the Nevada County Behavioral Health Department, and I am also the Mental Health Services Act coordinator.
Hi, I'm Danielle Mills. I'm the Suicide Prevention Coordinator for Sayre Community House, and I also sit on the Truckee Tahoe Suicide Prevention Coalition.
Hi, I'm June Gilfillan. I'm Intervention Coordinator, teacher on special assignment at Nevada Union High School.
Hi, everybody. Jeff Santos with Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, Executive Director of Student Services, and oversee everything related to mental health, student welfare, attendance, behavior, special ed, and COVID.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Lowe, part of the Department of Psychiatry at Tahoe Forest Hospital here in Truckee.
And I think that everybody introduced themselves. So could we start with the basics? What are signs? What are warning signs for somebody who might be suicidal? And is that actually the right term to use?
I'm happy to kick us off and let others jump in. But yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about is how do we identify somebody that's really struggling, suffering, and how do we get support to them? Oftentimes, people are really managing a lot of pain and suffering, and what we hope to build around people in our community is a realization that there's a whole bunch of resources and services out there for them to reach out to, and a whole bunch of people who care about them, who they can safely say, I'm really struggling, I'm having a hard time, I'm having thoughts of hurting myself or killing myself. Those are the skills that we want to build into our community, so that the many, many resources that are available are there when somebody needs them. And I think probably the most important thing, if you're worried about somebody in your life, is making space for those kinds of conversations to happen. I think often we may notice that somebody's having a hard time, but we might not recognize how hard a time they're having. And giving them space to say it's really tough right now is the most important thing. I think often we're anxious about saying words like suicide or hurting yourself or killing yourself when we're asking questions of somebody, and we worry we're going to plant the idea in their head somehow or something like that. And really, if a family member or a good friend is really struggling and saying, I'm sad, I'm things are hard right now, it's okay to ask that hard question. I just want to check in with you. Do you have any concerns about hurting yourself right now or killing yourself? Are those thoughts in your head right now? And if they're not, the person will be quick to say, no, it's not that kind of hard time. And that's great. But if they are, there's some relief in you putting it on the table and then being able to say, sometimes I am having those thoughts. And then you can dialogue from there. So I think that's the first thing, is just really creating space for open dialogue with people that you're concerned about. I'll let others jump in with other kind of things to think about when you're worried about somebody.
That was really great. Phoebe, I would add some of the practical things to look at least things that I tend to focus on would be isolation. If someone's beginning to isolate more than what you normally see them do. Also giving meaningful things away. They may have things that are meaningful to them and start giving things away to people. A recent trauma that they may have been a part of that may have happened to them. Also the feelings of being helpless or hopeless. And that's something Phoebe touched on, just asking them questions and trying to get that out of them. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. We definitely look at those feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. We also look at if there's a newly access to weapons, like is that something new for them? All of a sudden they're purchasing or talking about weapons. Definitely that raises some flags for us. An increase in substance use is another one. And a family history, we look at that too, of self-harm or suicide. And again, if there's any discussions on the internet or with personal friends or family about plans or thoughts, and those keep coming up for them. Those are definitely some things that I look at.
Anyone else? Anyone want to
Yeah.
add?
I'll add something on the school front. Everything that Curtis said, our staff, especially at our secondary, so middle school and high school, go through what Toby just posted, knowing the signs training, as well as our counselors are all fitted and equipped with that knowledge. Our district currently has a system for every student has a personal device. That's a school Chromebook. Anything that's searched related to any topic on suicide, self-harm, depression, we receive those alerts and we follow up immediately on that. So that's sort of like an externalizer in the written format. Sort of what Curtis said, we also recognize those signs in terms of externalizing what they're saying, any traumatic events. So really trying to keep our eyes and ears to the ground. For those that aren't externalizing, but that are having behavior that's not something that's typical of the student, we definitely are looking out for those signs as well, and then making sure we connect the students with support.
And now what about if somebody starts all of a sudden withdrawing? It's probably harder to reach out if somebody all of a sudden becomes withdrawn. Is there what is a good way to reach out and try to connect with that person?
On the school front, every school site that we have, we're fortunate to have school counselor on every site, as well as we contract with mental health clinicians in our district. Part of that knowing the signs is for our staff to recognize, student patterns and behaviors and whatnot. We have a caring connection survey that goes out every year for all of our students. And so students that might have a caring connected adult on campus, we usually will try to pair them up with check-ins if they are noticing any kind of difference, or one of our school counselors will do that as well. You'd be surprised, a lot of students are actually really good about reporting any changes in their peers and their friends through social media and or connection with school staff, and then parents as well, if they start noticing differences at home. So sometimes it's outside information coming to us, or it's our observation catching students in sort of a different pattern.
And I do think like those informal networks are the biggest safety net for people in community. It's neighbors, book groups, sports teams, schools are wonderful for youth, but for adults, paying attention to the people that you spend time with, and like Curtis and Jeff are saying, noticing behavior changes, noticing if somebody seems like they might be having a hard time, really trying to use some of those kind of natural social networks that exist, even if somebody's not your closest friend, you don't talk to them all the time, but you're in some kind of group with them, noticing how they're doing and maybe even asking how they're doing can really make a big difference as we take care of each other. And I do think it's one of the places where this very odd last couple of years that we've all experienced in our new online world, on the positive side, there are a lot of ways for people to reach out online that can be less threatening to sort of send a text or chat somewhere. And I think Toby put some of the resources in the chat already, but that does give other options or ways for people to sort of check in on each other through social media or through chat rooms and different places like that.
I didn't really get to introduce myself. My name is Ernest Alvarado. I'm a mental health clinician, and my position is working with the mobile crisis team. It's a partnership with Nevada County Behavioral Health and the Nevada County Sheriff's Office, and then my agency that I work with. But to answer that question specifically, I think what Phoebe was saying earlier, and everyone else, and Curtis, but I think the basic fundamental way to really just gain access to someone is just asking them, really having that conversation with someone that could be as simple as pointing out that you're noticing that they're withdrawn or that they seem a little off or different, and just really checking in to see what exactly that is and what it looks like for them, and to see how you can support. If it's someone that you know really well, then I think most people have that ability to kind of connect with their friends or their loved ones and to try to see what's going on. But if it's someone that you just kind of know or have not a very direct relationship or whatnot, really just comes down to asking those questions that sometimes can be very difficult. I think for us folks that are constantly having conversations because of the work that we have, breaching a subject like asking someone if they feel like harming themselves, or even using words like, do you want to kill yourself, can sound very, very scary for folks. But I think once it gets out there, it's really letting someone know that you're at least paying attention to them, and that maybe they can reach out to you, maybe not in that moment, but at least it will help kind of bridge that gap. On a community level, I think that's just the most important part about breaching subjects like this. They can be really, really heavy and emotional on everyone, especially now, given the way everything is going in our world. I think it's more important to reach out to folks now.
And aside from those pointed questions, I would also offer for those who might feel that they're not equipped or maybe not ready to ask those tough questions, just reach out and tell somebody that it's awesome having you in my life, or, I was having a taco today and I was just remembering our lunch last week. For so many of my patients, when they get to that really dark space, they are also grasping for any connection, any reason to keep going. And I have had patients that have decided not to make an attempt on their life just because they received a smile or a good job or a contact from a teacher, or so it doesn't need to be right to, hey, I see that you're withdrawing. Are you okay? Are you thinking about suicide? It can just be hey, this person, I haven't heard from them in a while. Just drop a line. How been thinking about you? How have you been? Just that connection can be so powerful for people, and then often open up the conversation.
Totally, and I would add to that, and just including people in plans, like casting that net a little bit wider, maybe when you're thinking about some activities to do or whatever. And I think particularly as we come out of this really isolated chapter of life, for people who feel less confident, who are unsure of themselves, maybe their social skills weren't super strong or confidence inspiring to begin with, this is a really hard chapter, sort of reconnecting back and then disconnecting again, as we just had to do, and then hopefully reconnecting again. And so I think none of us can kind of overdo it on like, oh, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while. It might mean the world to them to be included in a plan or brought along for an event.
I want to kind of go with the chain of how the conversation is going. So first we talked about what the warning signs are, which I think we did a great job covering that. And then we kind of dovetailed in there some of the risk factors. And I think it's good to know that for people that there is a difference between the two. And then also where we just kind of ended up was that there are protective factors like connection to family and friends. I know Jeff talked about resources within the school setting, and we've talked a little bit about resources within the community setting. So I think having a good, strong sense of the three of those, and if you don't have one or another, that there are other factors that can really help us protect youth and adults when it comes to suicide.
So if I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody and I don't feel that I'm equipped to actually have the conversation, where can I direct them? So basically, I want to know what resources do we have? I know that there's a lot of resources here in Nevada County, but I think it would be really helpful to go through and what resources are here for, be that for kids or for adults, and how do you connect someone with all the resources that you all provide?
I think one of the best resources that we have in the community that people can start at is the Crisis Stabilization Unit. My name is Sandy Farley, and I am the manager for the CSU. I'm an RN. I've worked there for almost 4 years. Started my career, took a small detour through ER nursing and came back to it. And having a crisis stabilization unit in the community, which we are located directly adjacent to the emergency department at Sierra Nevada Hospital. We're known as the portable building in the parking lot. Is that it's a safe place to come. You can just come and talk to a therapist. You don't have to stay. They can connect you to resources in the community that you might not know about. They maybe can help you connect to getting appointments or find out whatever's going on. You can link you to drug and alcohol services to get intake appointments, give you lists of therapists, work on a wide variety of things. And then if you want to stay at the CSU, also, there is a therapist and nurse there all the time that can help work with different things, connecting you to a doctor, talking you through with challenges with families and friends in a community setting, such as the CSU. Sometimes clients literally just need to come there to feel heard. They can't get into their therapist that day, so it's someplace they come just to get in to make it to the next therapist appointment. We average about 187 evaluations of local community members. We evaluate children all the way up. In the CSU, you do have to be 18 or older to stay. And we do take people who are on a 5150 hold and voluntary clients. So it's a much more conducive environment to stay in than the emergency department if you meet our admission criteria. The emergency department is a busy, fast-paced area that has lots of trauma and lots of activity going on. And that's not the place that those professionals usually did not go into that to work directly with the psychiatric population. They are very frustrated with the fact that it's a population they don't understand. So being able to partnership with us and hand clients off to us is really neat, that we are right next to them. A clinician can go into the emergency department and evaluate a client there, and then determine if they meet criteria to come to us and walk them over and do a warm handoff.
If I could just jump in, I think if you are talking with someone who's maybe not ready to go somewhere in person or is still being really apprehensive about receiving help, or if you just get stuck, A great place to also start is the National Lifeline. Just offer to give that person a call with them, or utilize the crisis text line if they're not even wanting to talk on the phone. And that is going to connect you to a crisis counselor who can give you more specific resources or a better idea of, does this person need to go to the emergency room? Do they need to go somewhere like the CSU? And then locally, Nevada County does have a crisis line, and Sierra Community House also has a crisis line that anyone can call and get referred to the right place.
And kind of to dovetail on that, another great resource is called Cowhopeconnect.org. It has different areas on it where they don't take your name or any information. You can connect via whatever group you identify with, or just in general. It's a live chat you can do online, or they give you text numbers where you can text somebody. So that tends to be a non-threatening format to some people who just aren't ready to go out and get that in-person help yet.
I think dovetailing on something June was saying earlier around sort of protective factors or resiliency factors that we can help support in people. I think all those resources we were just hearing about are examples of behaviors, help-seeking behaviors people can engage in. And I think at whatever first steps that looks like for somebody, and especially I think about this with my children, for example, is from the get-go, helping to build the idea that it's okay to reach out for help. And that's what we do. And maybe you're starting with safe people in your life, admitting whatever it might be, it's a hard day, or I was frustrated by something that happened today, and building that skill over time where that your go-to strategy when things are tough is to reach out to somebody, someplace, something. And I think whatever that comfort place is for that person, just really working with people on developing that strategy of reaching out for help is one of the best things we can do for each other.
On the school front, for parents listening or students, on a school day, if you will, school counselor, school psychologist, a trusted adult at a school site, if you're struggling with where to start and where to go, all of those individuals are well equipped with resources and where to steer you, whether it is to Danielle's program at Sierra Community House. We have other agencies that we work with. One additional piece is we do partner with Tahoe Forest Hospital. So Jonathan obviously works there, but we also have Lisa Steckert, who is our youth health navigator, and she's sort of this liaison between school, hospital, and community as well. But a place to start if you're really struggling with where to go to in the school setting, your counselor, school psych, or a trusted adult. And you can always reach out to student services. The link is in there as well, and we'd be happy to work with any family member or student.
One other thing I was going to add, Toby put in the chat the link for the Know the Signs training material, which is a really great kind of intro level to someone who might be just embarking on that conversation with someone they're concerned about. One of the things that the Know the Signs training encourage is, if you're talking to someone for the first time that you're really concerned about, is practice that conversation just like you would a presentation or an important meeting. It may feel a little silly, but just kind of making sure that you're really intentional with what you want to say, and that you are armed with the resources to help that individual if they do reveal that they do need help, and just that taking that extra time to make sure you're really well prepared for that conversation.
That is generally always a good idea. Any conversation or public speaking, you practice that. You stay on topic, and that also you stay maybe within the time allotted, depending on what you have. We have a couple questions in the chat asking if we can email a list of the resources shared tonight. Yes, we can absolutely do that. I did not ask when our attendees registered if it was okay to email that. So if nobody objects, if you don't want to receive a follow-up email with the resource list, please let me know. You can either email just townhall@ubanet.com, Otherwise, we can take Toby's doing such a great job at listing all these resources. And so we'll just grab them all and put them together. And I can also post just the resource list on Ubernet. And I'm pretty sure that there's also on the somewhere on the county website, there must be a way to find all these resources. Am I correct?
Yes, and Toby, I know there's a lot of resources going in the chat, but Toby also linked to that. It's the letstalknevadacounty.org page, which has a lot of different resources that we talked about. I think most of them, if not all, are there.
Perfect. So the Let's Talk Nevada and Nevada County, that is there. You have everything in one place. That's great. So some other things that I would really like to talk about is there are some new services. For example, I think the crisis stabilization unit is not it's not a long standing service. So what services have come up in the past, say 5 to 10 years that we didn't have before locally, and what is and why do we have these services now?
I think overarchingly, our community has an incredible network of crisis services. It somehow still never feels like enough, but there's really a lot going on around crisis services. And a lot of those services are based out of our 2 hospitals, Tahoe Forest and Sierra Nevada Memorial. We have crisis workers that will respond or are on site 24/7 in both sites. Up in Truckee, Tahoe Forest has really enhanced their behavioral health services. I'm sure Jonathan and others can speak to that. And then super exciting new service in the last 12 months is our mobile crisis team that Ernest is a part of, which really adds a great component to the crisis system.
I'll just piggyback on that. With the crisis, one thing that's been a really big benefit over the last few years is that it used to be when you had a crisis and you went to the ER, it would take quite a bit of time to be seen by a crisis worker or a doctor because they're just so impacted by other patients. And so now there's a dedicated time during the day. And Sandy, you can help out with this, but I think it's like from 10 to 10 or 9 to 10, 9 a.m. to 10 at night, where if it's not a medical issue, you can go on to the crisis stabilization unit there to speak with a crisis worker and not have to wait in the ER for several hours before you're able to meet with someone and be evaluated.
Yeah, correct. Our walk-in hours where anybody can self-present to the CSU and bypass the ER are from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And oh, excuse me, June, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to what I've noticed in the school setting as far as an increase in services. We do, I'm not exactly sure how long we do an annual, it's required by the state, but all of our staff does an annual suicide prevention training and response training, which I think is really helpful in equipping staff in every position to know how to respond. Because we have increased our mental health staff in the high school district, but especially on the current conditions, it's just really hard to meet the needs of students with so few people. So we've tried to increase staff training and also professional development to give them more tools and more confidence. A few years ago, we actually created a mental health protocol that basically, like a teacher or a classified staff who doesn't typically work with students when they're in mental health crisis, but it clearly outlines for them what to do to respond to that student's distress or maybe possibly even their threat. And then we have embedded more SEL, social emotional learning awareness into what we're doing. We're working on getting more intentional. The last several years, we've also worked with What's Up Wellness, which has done wellness checks for our freshmen. we try to do it universally. It does take some agreement and consent. And we've even actually increased the number of students now who participate in that. And then they communicate back to us students that they kind of have a heightened concern about as a result of participating in their wellness checkups. And I'm sure I'm leaving out some things, but those are fairly, I would say they're fairly new within the last 5 to 6 years.
As Phoebe said, I'm part of the mobile crisis team. As of right now, there's only one unit. It's myself and my partner, Deputy Galen Spittler. So I ride around in a patrol car with partner and deputy, and we respond to all phone calls or related concerns from community partners and or community members. Our position is a little more unique in the sense that it's kind of the last resort, in the sense if someone doesn't willingly want to receive services, or if they're presenting in the community where they seem or appear dangerous to themselves or possibly others because of some sort of mental health issue, my partner and I will go respond to that. We've assisted schools in our area, especially folks that have been screened with What's Up Wellness. My wife actually was one of the screeners for What's Up Wellness, but we try to provide a partnership with all community members. And sometimes I know that it can seem fearful or even a little intimidating at times when a patrol unit shows up to a mental health call, but what we're trying to do is to de-escalate that concern or fear by presenting a team, not just myself and my partner as well, who's just a little more equipped and to handle certain calls with a little bit more sensitivity, with an outcome that also has maybe just resources or providing connections to other agencies that we partner with, or even informing them about the CSU and transporting them voluntarily, or working with families to figure out how they can get them to the hospital. Because our goal is really just to provide the least traumatizing type of intervention to folks. And sometimes that does require, calling dispatch or 911 because folks don't know who else to call. And so our role is really just trying to bridge that partnership between families or other community members and to assist folks the best we can within the most least restrictive environment. Sometimes that does result in them meeting criteria. And for the folks out there that don't know what that means, there's a very specific subset of criteria that we as clinicians determine that if that fits within the job description that we have, or it's either what we call danger to self or danger to others or grave disability. And within each three of those subcategories, there is some information, certain criteria that needs to be met if we're going to enact the Welfare Institutions Code of 5150s. And that means it's an involuntary hold. Folks have to usually be sent to a psychiatric facility for up to 72 hours. But oftentimes that when we place on hold, sometimes it's just a temporary need for safety because we can't ensure another method of safety for them. And then the crisis workers, my partners, can step up and figure out, well, is there a family member or is there someone that can provide a resource to you without having to take that step? And sometimes it is necessary, but for the folks and the community members out there, our program is definitely geared towards helping folks that are in a pretty significant crises. But oftentimes I receive phone calls from family members to describe to me what's going on in their homes or what it looks like, or other, school partners or other behavioral health employees or whatnot, just to kind of shoot that off from us and try to see, okay, well, we don't think this would be the meeting the criteria, but we can go out there and meet with them and offer resources. Or do you think that would be traumatizing? The point is just to really try to connect with families or whoever is calling in regards to whoever needs the assistance. So that's available. And like I said, there's only one unit right now. My partner and I work Sunday through Wednesday with the hopes of starting another unit pretty soon. So we have every day of the week coverage. And then the ultimate goal is to have at least 18 hours every day. But that's to see how it works with the community and see how it responds well. But I think now, the hope is to get the 7-day coverage. I would love to be available, but we'll have families and homes as well that we need to be with. But so having that split up is, I think, would be really a great addition to the community. But yeah, so far our hours are Sunday through Wednesday, and then 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So if you call the county's dispatch or whatnot, and you'd like to speak to me about something that's having to do with some sort of crisis or just getting input on that, I'll be more than happy. They can just transfer from the call center to me, to my personal cell phone, and then I'll be more than happy to to speak to you folks about what concerns you have or what you think maybe our program can do for you.
And
And speaking on the,
Oh, I'm sorry. So I just wanted to say, as far as the hospital goes, right? Sometimes we don't have access, or kids don't have access to all the services that are out there. Most every kid has a pediatrician, right? And so I think it's important to remember that as a resource. We have wonderfully trained pediatricians here at the hospital. We also have a couple of unique resources, Lisa Steckert, who was mentioned earlier, and we have an embedded talk therapist in PEDS now, Chelsea Roth. And that is an easy referral to make through the pediatrician, through the child's pediatrician. She's, I find her very approachable for youth, just to have an opportunity to talk, just to sit and talk if they're willing. But a great start would be at the pediatrician's visit. And I know that they're asking those questions and responding. And then the other piece too is, I don't want people to be afraid of the ER, right? The ER here in Truckee has done a ton in terms of hiring staff, creating a safe space, a separate room for psychiatric emergencies so they can have their own space. And we have, again, some wonderfully caring staff in the ER. Nobody wants to go to the emergency room for any reason, right? And of course, we would like to be able to treat and care for all of these people in the least traumatic environment possible. However, suicidal ideation, it can be a life-threatening emergency. So I don't want people to be nervous that, oh, if I'm going to go overboard here, or they're going to not like the experience. At the end of the day, it's about saving lives, and we have some, again, great people doing great things out there.
another benefit of our local CSU is that when clients do come to us on a 5150 hold, that's not just a generalized guarantee that they're going to go to hospital placement. Our therapists and nursing staff work very hard to try to stabilize them and keep them in our community to try to avoid the trauma of going to a locked psychiatric facility that's sometimes 5 and 6 hours away from home. And this way, when they are discharged, they're discharged with warm handoffs to local resources that will continue to help them outside of our CSU.
I was just going to add one thing, that if there is a positive through COVID, I think it's forced us all to be on a virtual world, sort of what we're doing right now in a town hall. And I think that has lent itself to a lot of extra support that you may not have been able to access, especially up in the Tahoe-Truckee region or areas where you're a little bit more remote. I know when we were in distance learning at school, our counselors stay connected with our students through a virtual format. So I just need to highlight that part, because I think it's really opened our eyes to the possibilities of what we can do if we don't have the face-to-face opportunity at times.
And just to reiterate, because we're talking about reaching out, and if anybody, it's okay to call 911 if you feel that there is an emergency. It's absolutely okay to call 911, because those dispatchers, they are trained and they can connect you with all these fabulous people here and these resources. So 911 is for emergencies, but this would be an emergency. So it's perfectly okay to call, because oftentimes, I mean, for another topic, we get calls from people that will say, hey, I see smoke and there's flames. And my first question is, have you called 911? And they're like, well, no, I didn't know if I should bother them. It's okay. It's okay to do that. And I think that's really something. Yes, there are there are a lot of non-emergency lines, but every once in a while, if you have to, if all you can remember is 911, just please go ahead and call. And Ernesto, can you talk a little more about the mobile crisis unit and how, and I believe you mentioned how people can get in touch with you either through 911 or through the regular, the non-emergency line, because, and also, do we have a cell phone friendly line to access 911 for people who don't have access to a landline? Yes, I believe that is it's called the business number for NCSO, and I'm sure Toby can put that in the chat. But Ernesto, can you talk a little more about your job?
Sure. So essentially, like I said, I had mentioned before, the position itself is a partnership between Nevada County Behavioral Health, the Nevada County Sheriff's Office, and Sierra Mental Wellness Group, who's my employer. Essentially, we're contracted to collaborate with the Sheriff's Office by being partnered. So my partner is a deputy, and so my office is a patrol unit, which is a very different environment for me. And so what we do is we respond to all community-oriented calls that have to do with any kind of mental health crises or something that appears to be mental health related that a specialized unit like ours can be of assistance to. In order to get a hold of us, you do have to contact dispatch. That's the initial way to kind of refer out. So community members can call the number. And I was typing kind of a little synopsis of it, and then I'm going to put the number of dispatch there for you in case folks do have cell phones and 911 pings you to another area or whatnot. You can just call the direct number, which is 530-265-7880, and I'll type that in the little message that I have for everyone else. But essentially what you can do is when you call the dispatch, it will be the Nevada County dispatch, so they refer to all law enforcement and or fire, depending on the type of emergency. But what they do is you can ask for the mobile crisis team, or you can refer to me. My name, I'm the only Ernesto, I believe, who works for the county right now. But I'm also the only clinician that is in the mobile crisis team as of right now. And they also know my partner very well, and he's well equipped to respond to calls. We usually like to kind of call folks back ahead of time. Both of us kind of working it together to see what we can do and how we can assist whatever crisis you or your family member or a stranger in the community is going through. The one barrier that we have as of right now is that we operate under the county's jurisdiction, so the sheriff's jurisdiction. So Grass Valley PD, Truckee PD, and Nevada City PD, they would be operating, we wouldn't be responding to calls in their jurisdiction. But what they can do is and they've done this, they've utilized our services several times already, is that if they feel it's something that we have rapport with a certain person or individual that's being called upon, or if they just feel as though that our skill set and our tactics and the way we operate would be a little better suited, they can get on dispatch on air and they can request our services officially. And so as long as that happens, we have no problem going into Grass Valley or Nevada City. And we've done it twice in Truckee. We've assisted Truckee PD before they have their own mobile crisis unit as well. And then we also responded several times to Grass Valley PD and then NCPD as well. So we have a pretty good relationship with all the officers. And I think that that's something that they can utilize if they want. They don't always do it, so it's not a guarantee, but if you call dispatch, you can say, hey, I'm in Grass Valley and I would like some mental health services. Perhaps maybe that officer would like to utilize the mobile crisis team. And at least that way the dispatch can be like, hey, they might want to utilize that, but it would be up to the officer and or patrol sergeant to make that decision on their side. But as far as getting connected to us, calling the dispatch number and requesting us for whatever crisis you feel is necessary, and we'll do our best to respond in the most appropriate way. But I'm typing that information here now, so if you folks want to look up the number or don't have access to it, I'm going to send it shortly.
And if I could quickly just jump in and go back to what Pascal was saying about utilizing 911, just speaking for myself, and I think all the other panelists, we never expect anyone, any community member off the street to jump into a grave crisis situation other than calling for the appropriate help. And I think as well for people working in the emergency room, for first responders, they would rather get that call and have that person be not as emergent as you maybe thought they would be and get stabilized and get the help than no one makes that call and we lose a community member. So I just sort of wanted to put that back in there that yes, please call 911 if you're not sure what to do. If you've tried things and they're not working, or someone, is in front of you making those statements of wanting to harm themselves or kill themselves.
And so a couple of questions that come in various channels, and is are there any resources available, especially local resources, for survivors of a suicide attempt and their friends and family, and how is that handled?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that as well. So one resource that is available to friends and family, or really anyone that has survived a suicide loss, is Friends for Survival. So if Toby could put the information in the group chat about that. So Friends for Survival is a support group that meets on a weekly basis. And it's, like I said, for anyone that has lost someone to suicide, it's a support group. There's different topics every week. They give resources, for therapy, coping skills, all that sort of stuff. So that is in Nevada County now. We're currently working on getting one for the Truckee area. So one thing that I'd love to bring up is that we are currently looking for facilitators. You don't have to be any sort of mental health professional. You just have to be someone that has personally experienced suicide loss in your life. So we would love to get volunteers if anyone is looking for somewhere to start with that. Another resource that's really great is through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have a program called Healing Conversations, and that connects you with a peer who has also survived a suicide loss and can just provide some support. Currently in our area, we don't have face-to-face connections for that, but you can access that peer network from anywhere within the United States and connect via phone, via Zoom, and just have another person to reach out to.
To add to that, behavioral health, we have a dedicated staff who work closely with the coroner. And so when someone dies by suicide, we immediately reach out to the surviving family members and offer empathy in a compassionate way, and try to provide any services, not only just immediately, but sometimes the grieving process is just different for everybody. So we provide services for the future, saying, hey, look, in the future, if you're still feeling that you may need some support, or if you find that you do, please call this number and we'll have someone work closely with.
I wanted to dovetail just a little bit on what Danielle Mills was talking about for the Friends for Survival. I think it's great that we have a local group. That's definitely a great asset for people in this community. Sometimes for people who can't get into their local group, or they're just not at that spot. Friendsforsurvival.org, which I think may have, it's in the chat already. That's kind of a good dipping the toe in the water and getting connected. They have a great monthly newsletter that comes out that's very supportive. And if people are looking for what does that look like for the group, you can go to that website and get more information. Super supportive.
Another resource I think we need to talk about is just the community, and actually they're the biggest resource, especially for our kiddos who are more likely to go to their peers than they will an adult, even a trusted family member with any. So any kiddos listening out there, right? We need your help, and I think it's also important for the community to know that another risk factor when we're talking about death by suicide is having someone close to you who has died by suicide. And so if you're a parent out there and your kids shares, hey, I was chatting with this friend of mine online, and I found out that another friend of ours who maybe I've never even met, lives states away, right, died by suicide. Again, everybody's ear should kind of perk up and make sure that we are not just touching base to support one another in support groups, but also understanding that we're all a little bit higher risk when something like that happens. And again, looking out for those signs, and just again, reaching out.
I think one of the things that I forgot to mention at the high school, in Nevada Joint Union High School District, we have STARS counselors, and so referrals can be made, to see a STARS therapist, and sometimes they just do drop-in appointments, and sometimes they refer students out for mental health to behavioral health services. So that's a great resource for getting students either connected within the school setting or within the community, or sometimes even for both.
I'm pretty sure that the same resources up in Truckee, Jeff.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have Jasmine Bro. She is sort of like a good mental health liaison between Nevada and Placer County. That's one thing that I can say our community is rallied together. We have our Suicide Prevention Coalition, and there's so many agencies and groups within our area. To be honest, as a parent, I could see where that might be overwhelming at times too, regarding who can I go to. So a lot of times it's word of mouth and or maybe a friend or a family member that has used a certain agency or group. But our website, and I put a link in the chat, a list of local resources as well that can be shared out later as well. But yeah, we have the same robust amount of options as well.
Yeah, and another question that comes up is, are there any special resources for either LGBTQ kids? Because oftentimes there is even more pressure there, and it's harder from the get-go. So, and years ago, and I emphasize because all the comments we got, it was years ago, it was really hard for LGBTQ kids to even talk to anybody, because it was just so hard to say, well, why? And they just couldn't come out. So fortunately, things have changed, but I'm just wondering, are there any additional resources maybe, or is it also are there support groups, peer groups maybe, where that can take some of that pressure off, so that it actually doesn't go to these dark thoughts, etc., because it's okay to be born that way or this way.
At Nevada Union, and I'm sorry, I don't know all the specifics about every site, but we do have an LGBTQ group here that is, supportive. I do want to bring up, and I know Toby already put it in the chat, it might be worth putting again, which is the district wellness guide, which was put together by our school counselors across the district. It has different resources for students in regards to mental health. It has a lot of the links that were talked about already for the county, like some of the county links. There are specific, I'll call them rooms within the wellness guide, and there is one for LGBTQ students. There's also some great videos on there, just a couple of them. One specifically is like, my friend wants to die, how can I support them? And so it's a very youth-friendly video to try to help them walk through how to support a peer. And then there's also one for the student themselves if they're having those suicidal thoughts, and they can get information on there. So the wellness guide is pretty robust. It covers a lot of the things, actually, Pascal, that you've brought up already. So it's a fantastic resource, really, for anybody, anywhere. I mean, obviously, you don't have to be within Nevada Joint Union High School District because it's a public site. So it's a great resource.
Also, I see someone put the Trevor Project in, and just a little more specifically, the Trevor Lifeline is a crisis line for any LGBTQ plus youth under the age of 24. It is 24/7, 365, just to have someone to talk to. You don't have to be experiencing suicidal thoughts or anything like that. You can just call if you're just looking for someone to talk to. Another great resource is the Trans Lifeline. That's also 24/7, 365. And that one is also really cool because it is peer run. So you're talking to someone who has probably experienced a lot of the same issues that you have. So just calling out those two resources specifically, I think, are really helpful.
For our school district, I can say on a staff perspective, we have amazing staff. that are well educated, as well as sympathetic and or understanding of the challenges that students might be facing. So there's a lot of counseling staff, our teachers, there's a lot of resources on that front. We've tried to establish pride clubs at our middle schools and our high schools, a safe opportunity for students to connect with other students, as well as our wellness centers. An area that we continue to fight, if you will, or work on are students that are not accepting and or creating challenges for the community. And so that's where we often are reaching out to our local community resources and so forth. But I will say across the board, trying to make schools the safest as possible across the board. But our pride clubs have been very well attended. Kim Bradley is our wellness manager in our area for all of our schools. And she, as well as our counselors and our local agencies like working with Sierra Community House, have been awesome.
I think most of our sites in the district have a GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance, which has, I think, really been supportive for students in kind of addressing some of what Jeff was talking about, other peers that are not sensitive and can be cruel. And I think it's been a positive thing. They have support, not only from people who share their orientation, but also from people outside of their orientation. So I think that's a pretty powerful tool for them.
One other resource that's available in Western Nevada County is through Bright Futures for Youth within NEO. They host, I think, monthly group, kind of peer-led groups for LGBTQ plus and youth and young adults called the Rainbow Social. So I think usually their events are posted on their website, but that's a great resource for those youth who want to connect with their peers.
And just to add to that from personal experience, that LGBTQ teens often are great allies, because they will pick up very fast if something's wrong, because they know that it's not always easy to be either perceived as different or something's made. So they will pick up real fast on it. So they're really good. So if there are any LGBTQ kids out there and you want to help, so you have all these people here, they have asked for help. So if you want to volunteer, that would be more than welcome, I believe. And another question that came in is, how can you reach especially kids that are homeless, unhoused teens? Because according to what was the latest point in time count, there were 144 of them. 144 kids under 18 that were unhoused, and they are not as lucky as that puppy. So how can anyone reach out to the unhoused kids?
So each school, I think each school site period has a McKinney-Vento liaison. And we do a staff training each year on what might be some of the red flags or indicators of students who might be experiencing homelessness or even unstable housing. And then there are a variety of resources that are available to them. But basically, I think what it is just kind of in some ways the same, knowing the signs. If they're talking about living with their grandparent, if they're talking about, living with, staying at a friend's house, just kind of being able to pick up on what the signs are, and then reaching out to the McKinney-Vento liaison at each site. And then they connect them with resources. And there's help in the community too, that we can connect them with, that have partnered with the high school. So that's been great.
on our front what we call data confirmation. So every time a parent enrolls their child in the school, they have to go through a screener. And as part of that, identifying their living conditions and where they live. And therefore that kind of triggers, if you will, students that are considered homeless or potentially in a situation that would be classified as homeless. And then we do reach out to those families directly to identify what their needs might be. Some it's temporary, but some it's more long-term. So we really try to connect them with options in our community. And a lot of our school sites, we have like a resource, I'm trying to blank on the right word, but basically various resources that, as far as food, clothing, medical supplies, that sort of thing. So families that are in need or a student might be in need, we have those available to pass out for families.
The Nevada County Superintendent of Schools office also has, we can request grant funds for things like additional tutoring, help with transportation. We have some students that live in outlying areas that really, it's difficult for them to get to the bus stop. But they do definitely help us with some grant funds to meet specific needs for students. And then part of the, I think Jeff was referring to what we call the residency questionnaire in some ways. And so part of that residency questionnaire is also to look at, do they have parents who are migrant workers, or do the students have, do they receive special education services? Do they need additional mental health services to help them cope with their current living situation? So the questionnaire that the counties and state have put together kind of helps us drill down on what students need and hopefully be better at meeting those needs. But it is part of the enrollment packet, and yeah, so lots of ways to get that information. It's just sometimes tricky because people don't identify as homeless, even though they're in unstable situations. So.
Right. We are approaching our cutoff time, so but I would really like for each and every one of you to basically reiterate the resources that you provide, and also talk a little bit about how you work together, because from what I'm hearing is that there is really great collaboration going on between the schools, the various services. And it's really important that people understand that it's, again, reaching out. Even if you reach out to the school can connect you with other resources if needs be. So if we could have that as closing. So maybe June, could you maybe kick us off?
Well, I think that we've definitely been able to partner more successfully with some of our agencies within the community. And we've talked about behavioral health. Parents that have students that receive behavioral health services have the option of the option of doing some kind of exchange of information so that we can work more cohesively. So that's super supportive. I know we talked about Brighter Futures for Youth. Recently, they created a SAFE program, which is for transitional age youth. And particularly those students that you talked about already, Pascal, that are homeless or have experienced homelessness. And that's kind of another link between community agencies and the schools. So we're definitely trying to strengthen those because each of us, I think, each agency has access to certain pieces of information and other resources. And so when we work together, it definitely benefits everybody. I want to bring up one thing that I forgot to bring up earlier. We talked about after suicide or even after a suicide attempt. And I know Ernesto talked a little bit about, sometimes individuals go into placement. And if they are students when they return to the educational setting, Often when students are released or when individuals are released, they have some kind of a safety plan. And we really like to be able to emulate that safety plan because there are mental health professionals who have helped those individuals identify coping mechanisms and triggers. So I think sometimes people don't realize that there's a safety plan that students or individuals have when they leave, and that those can be emulated to a certain degree within the educational setting. So that's kind of another link between the work that people do and how we can carry it on and support it in the educational setting.
To reiterate my program, it's the program that I'm partnered with is, like I said, it's a partnership with the Sheriff's Office. So essentially it's embedding behavioral health or a crisis specialist like myself in a patrol unit, and to really just offer the most appropriate services we can to our community. So our partnerships span within the hospital. We have partnerships with the hospital, the CSU, behavioral health, adult social services, child welfare services, the schools, the joint unified school districts, really just trying to partner in that and trying to figure out how we can meet folks that are needing emergency services from us, and how to collaborate and to either refer them to appropriate agencies and or provide that service ourselves in the form of involuntary detention and whatnot. And the other idea is like bridging that a relationship we have with law enforcement, because it was said before, when someone's experiencing a crisis, law enforcement, I've seen every single, the partners that I've worked with, whether it's been the deputies or the officers and the neighboring agencies, all would prefer to get that call to perform that welfare check, to do what they can do to make sure that that immediate need or crisis is resolved. And so I just want to reiterate that too, that if you have a crisis and for some reason me and my partner are not available, the other deputies and officers that I've seen are more than competent and appropriate for that immediate need for crises. And they can also perform the duties that we need to do, or at least to refer them to other mental health providers to kind of do that warm handoff as well. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged for calling emergency services, even if I'm not available or my partner, because the other partners we have can absolutely respond to those calls, because the most important thing is to provide safety to our folks.
And for those of us at the Crisis Stabilization Unit, we respond to psychiatric needs and emergencies for people throughout the lifespan. So I honestly cannot think of an agency in town that we do not collaborate and work with, depending on the age of the client that we're serving at the time.
I was just going to say in California, we're specifically about the program that I work with closely at the Behavioral Health Department. In California, we're really lucky to have a funding stream called the Mental Health Services Act. And for those of you who don't know, it's a 1% tax on millionaires in California that gets distributed to all of the counties for mental health services. And so that funding stream provides us the opportunity to have a lot of these programs in collaboration in our community and help support and grow those programs. Things like that were mentioned here today, like the What's Up Wellness mental health screenings in our high schools, our suicide prevention efforts, supporting our crisis operations both here in Western Nevada County and in Truckee, youth mentoring programs, homeless outreach programs, case management, the list goes on. And so, I think that's something that we're really lucky to have in California and in Nevada County.
I can share on Trek Unified Front, similar to what June said. I just want to let our listeners know, parents and students, that we're here to help. Schools traditionally have been arithmetic and reading and literacy, and we've encompassed so much more than that over the years, including your mental health needs and support. We do have a partnership with all the agencies that we mentioned tonight. I do want to point out Truckee Police Department. We also partner with them, and they do go through their own series of training, similar to what Ernesto was saying earlier, in the sense of when they show up to calls, as well as Tahoe Forest Hospital. Another piece too that we encounter with youth related to substances and the alignment with depression leads to suicide and so forth. Gateway Mountain Center is a local group that offers a mindfulness-based substance abuse program. So those that are listening, definitely check them out, and we can throw that resource in there as well. Definitely don't be ashamed. You don't have to go through this alone. And if there's anybody out there that has gone through our school system that feels like there's a need for improvement in any area, we're always open to hearing that. Want to listen more to that. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I like to just reiterate sort of what everyone has been saying is that especially in Northern California on the Western Slope here, we are so lucky to have the collaboration between agencies and organizations that we do. From my position, wearing two hats, working for Sierra Community House and being on the Truckee Tahoe Suicide Prevention Coalition. We work with law enforcement, the school district, the health systems, the counties, and it is so great to have that collaboration and resource because, you know, if I don't have the answer, if I don't have the resource, someone else that I know will. And then also as far as Sierra Community House goes, we're not just about suicide prevention, that is my role, but we also provide hunger relief services, legal services, crisis intervention, aside from someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis, domestic violence, sexual assault, all sort of those things. And then we also do provide Know the Signs, QPR, which is question, persuade, refer, and mental health first aid. So we do have a lot of resources available for community members or groups that are looking to be more informed.
Hi, it's Curtis with behavioral health. And I think one of the common themes I'm hearing is partnerships, and we believe real strongly in that too. It's kind of cliche, but it does take a village, and we rely on everybody's expertise. We have multiple meetings and connections with several different partners within the community. School is a big one with us. We are very heavily involved with all the schools in our county. General practitioners in the county, the crisis team, probation, the courts, even several different community programs that are just out there too. We're very much involved because we know how important it is just to have that support with one another. One of the things that we also do, as just a reminder, when a kid goes in for a crisis evaluation, we do follow up with the family and we follow up, see what's going on, what services they did get, and how we can get them in services if they qualify for Medi-Cal or other grant funding resources. So we're constantly calling and checking in on folks as well.
And last quick thing to add to that, I hope anybody listening is getting the very strong sense that there's an incredible network of supports in place in our community, all kinds of people ready and willing to help, services, resources, programs. And also at the end of the day, the most effective suicide prevention strategy is each of us as individual community members. People are most likely to reach out to somebody they know, not to a professional helper to start with. And the more we can do to really listen to each other, to really care for each other, to make space to have hard conversations, to be a safe person for people to share how they're really feeling with, the better we can protect each other and our community. And that's the biggest takeaway for all of us. Each and every one of us can play a role in supporting one another.
And I would say that those are great words to conclude this webinar. I would like to thank all the panelists, our audience, the live audience. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. And yes, we will, this recording will be made available. It's going to be up in probably 2 hours. It will be up and available. And thanks again, everybody. Thank you for your work, for what you do, and thanks for your time and for being here and for sharing all the resources. There are a lot of resources, and so if each and every one of us, if we can pay a little more attention to one another and just try and just take the time and be kind, well, this community will be even better. So thanks, everybody. Be safe. Have a great evening.
Thank you.